Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Today we have Sai Tid. He's going to be talking about overcoming imposter syndrome. So I'm going to pass the time to him. If you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. So Sai, you're good to take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Preet. Hi, everybody. My name is Sai. I said something nice about Lambda School on Twitter, and they were like, hey, you should come talk to us. And apparently they did enough research on me in the background without telling me that they said this, he's okay. He can come and talk to our students. So I'm going to talk to you about imposter syndrome, learning on the job, and a little bit about mindset. So some background on me. I've been a software engineer for close to 20 years, in and around the industry. Took a break in the middle. I've worked for big companies. I've worked for small companies, like tiny one-man shows and giant, enormous behemoths. I currently work for one of the behemoths. I was describing imposter syndrome. First of all, I was describing that I was coming to give this lecture to a coworker of mine, a principal engineer here, and he was like, "What imposter syndrome? What's that?" And I said, "Well, it's the feeling that you don't fit, that you're a engineer in name only, and you don't know what you're doing, and everyone around you is smarter, better, faster, and comes up with better ideas than you." And he laughed at me, and he said, "You just described every day of work for me." So I don't want, I hope, you didn't come to this lecture, hoping to learn when is imposter syndrome going to go away. The reality is never. It's a mindset. It's something that we inflict on ourselves. My manager, I just moved into a new organization here at the company, and engineering services, where we engineer engineering. And my manager is new, and she's surrounded by technical people that know way more than she does. And she's trying to, navigate those waters and get a better sense of how to do her job, how to manage us. It's like herding cats. And same thing. She's like, I'm way over my head all the time. So the idea that, that you know what you're doing, like when it just doesn't happen. And it's really a mindset you inflict on yourself. I don't know if any of you are familiar with familiarity bias. And it's the idea that the more you hear something, the more likely you are to believe it to be true. So if you're the kind of person that makes a mistake and says, I'm a moron, or I suck, and you keep doing that, you reinforce the idea in your own head that you suck. And then sucking at your work becomes your default state. And you actually reinforce this idea of imposter syndrome to yourself. And everyone is perfectly suited to self-sabotage. And mistakes are just part of the process. Have to learn that failure is just part of the learning process. It's how you learn. I don't know if you've ever done a project or a lab where everyone's doing something first, like brand new for the first time, nobody's done it before, and there's always one or two people that get it right the first time. Like they knock it out of the park. I mean, it's like they've done it before. And everyone else is like very jealous. Why is that? How come that person did it so right? And I always feel sorry for that person because they don't know why they did it right. And then when they have to do it again, they don't know why what they did was right, and they have to, hope they do the magical, combination and get it right again. So mistakes are necessary. You absolutely have to have them to find the edges of the ideas. There's a wonderful quote that I love that is, as the island of my knowledge grows, so do the shores of my ignorance. So as I learn, I realize how much I really don't know. And everyone's on their own island. and everyone's learning, and everyone's trying to figure out, where they are. So finding the edges of that island, you find it through mistakes. You find the edges of a tool or an idea, and you find out where it doesn't work. And in this industry, there's no silver bullet. Someone will tell you that React is the best thing you can possibly be learning at this time, and it actually is at the moment, but it'll probably change. In 5 years, someone will come up with a brand new JavaScript framework, and you'll have to go learn that, and that's totally okay. Because one thing that I've learned in the last 20 years is that modern computing is brand new. It's not like plumbing. With plumbing, we know how to push liquid through pipes, and we figured out that hundreds of years ago. But with modern computing, it's brand new. It's changing all the time. When I started, there were no smartphones. Email was just starting to be a thing. You had to call people, like literally on the phone, call them. You wanted to install a program, it came on disks, like 20 disks, and you had to, it took forever. So modern computing is brand new. It's still shiny, squeaky clean. We're still figuring it out, which means that nobody knows what they're doing. Anybody that tells you they know what they're doing is full of crap. They're making things up, and they're projecting confidence, but in reality, they don't know. So that's imposter syndrome. It's the sense that you're not quite ready, and the reality is nobody's ready. And so long as you learn how to learn how you learn best, and treat yourself well, and please go easy on yourself. Don't be hard on yourself. Be, probably the number one underrated skill in this industry is patience. And patience with yourself and patience with others. So I'm going to segue into, it segues right into learning on the job, because you'll never learn everything all at once, and you'll never know everything. Even when you start a project, you'll never know everything. Even when you finish a project, so I think by the fact that you're already at Lambda School and you're already learning, you already have the best skill or the best thing that you need, which is drive. Once you have drive, you can do everything else. Skills can be taught. Drive can't. That you have to bring through the door. You have to bring with you. And when we interview, finding the people that know how they learn and can learn quickly, but again, admit to themselves and to others that they don't know everything. And probably the three most powerful words that you can say at any point in an engineering career is, I don't know. Being able to say that I don't know is huge. And I do it all the time, all day long. I am the dumbest guy in the room. I want to be the dumbest guy in the room. I'll be in meetings and somebody will be speaking about something that I should know about, but I'll say, you know what? I don't mean to ask the dumb question, but could you please explain what you just said? Like you were talking to a 5-year-old. And chances are there's at least one other person in the meeting that is thinking the same thing. So it's just the idea that, oh, I'm the only dumb person. No, everyone's pretty ignorant. So it's always helpful to ask. Always ask. What's worse is someone saying, "Do you understand?" and you say, and you don't, and they go on as if you do understand, and everyone is making decisions based on things that they don't understand, and you end up with a big mess. And nobody likes mess. So be humble, be patient, and be positive. It's huge to be positive. And humility is part of it. I mean, and it feeds back into the imposter syndrome, where you feel like you don't belong, so you're naturally humble, which works. It's great. Because you can't assume that just because everyone else doesn't know what they're doing, that does not give you the permission to wander into a new team and assume that they don't know what they're doing at all, and they should listen to you. And when you have no idea what they've been doing to solve their problem for the last 6 months to a year, and you haven't been there. So it's good to remember that, and remember that everyone's human, and everyone is fighting their own battles. I wanted to mention there's a wonderful, I don't know if you've ever heard it or watched the David Foster Wallace gave a commencement speech for, I think, Kenyon College. You can Google it. The video is available, the transcript is available. It's called This is Water. And I try to read that at least once a month. It reminds me how to be human when confronted with people who are sure they are right and are stressed out. You know, there's deadlines, there's pressure, managers want things, you're behind schedule, you're always behind schedule. And it's just a reminder that everyone is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. And so just, it's really easy to forget that when you're dealing with code and ones and zeros and websites and things like that. So it's important to remember how to be human when dealing with a bunch of introverts that don't like talking to other people. So yeah, the drive. One thing I did, so most of this stuff is mindset. It's going into a job or an environment that's new and being open-minded and being aware of what you can actually control, which is actually really quite small. Someone would, some people think, well, I control my body. No, you really don't. There's so much autonomic process going on to keep you breathing and to, I'm twisting this little cough drop wrapper. There's so much going on with just doing that. I can't stop my heartbeat. You can think of your body as the brain, as the machine your brain rides around in. So you can really control how you respond to things. That's about it. You can't control your family. You can't control your colleagues. You can't control how they view you. You can just be true to yourself as much as you can. And just control how you respond to things, and yeah, it feeds back into that kind of thing. I'm starting to wander around because I got through my list of things I wanted to tell you. Some things that have been helpful for me for my career have been books. So read Clean Code and read Pragmatic Programmer. Those are two wonderful. Clean Code is actually this giant tome that it actually comes from Microsoft. Don't hold that against them. Don't hold that against the book. It's really, really good. It has some great patterns and habits to get into when dealing with code and other people. And it's a lot about communicating with your teammates in your code environment. You can probably say that most, if not all, human dysfunction is a result of improperly communicating expectations. So Clean Code is great for that. Pragmatic Programmer is great for understanding that you can, and then there's another one called, it's not a programming book, it's called Filters Against Folly. It's a really good book for realizing that you cannot do merely one thing. So every choice you make, every architectural decision you make, every problem you try to solve does something, there's a side effect, and you never know what it is. It usually bites you when you don't want it. But it's just reminding that simple is better, and simple is way better than complex. Because if you do something complex, there's an idea that if you use all of your brain power in the pursuit of a solution, it takes somebody smarter than you to debug it. So keep it as simple as possible, especially since the person, like, leave code comments and things like that, because you will, you're speaking to other people through your code, and you're trying to explain why you did certain things sometimes, and you'll, most of the time, the person trying to figure out what you did is you 6 months later. So be nice to future self, because future self will thank you for writing clean code with putting comments like why you did this crazy thing that nobody else ever did before, and you will thank future self will thank you. And mostly just remember that everybody is navigating those islands of knowledge, and they're trying to figure things out along with everybody else. I had a bunch of notes. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that would be helpful. So I have some family members that run ultra marathons, like 100-mile races in less than 24 hours. Yes, I think they're crazy too. But what they talk about when they're out there is you're not racing against other people. I listened to a recent Farnham Street blog podcast where Amelia Boone was interviewed. She's a lawyer, and she runs these races too. And she says that she doesn't mind it when other people beat her. What she minds is when she beats her, when she beats herself. And you can do that in engineering as well. You can really easily talk yourself into a bad situation, into a bad solution, by assuming that your way is the only way. There's a wonderful book called Thinker Toys. It's you'll find it for like marketing websites, or I think it was recommended to me by somebody that was in marketing. But it's a wonderful way of looking at a problem. And it's not an engineering book. And you typically will not read it all at once. It's not a good idea to read it all at once. But it's a wonderful way to think differently and to look at a problem space in a different way. And you might find surprising things there. Oh, anyone who doesn't already listen or read to Farnham Street, highly recommended. I think it's fs.blog. It's a website dedicated to learning and decision-making heuristics. So learning how to learn and learning how to make better decisions. The wealth of information there, it's gold. It's pure gold. There's some guys I follow on Twitter. Don't do political Twitter. Do Twitter to listen to conversations of people you would normally not have any contact with. It's a really great resource. Another thing that I was thinking about that might be helpful. There's a technique that's very rarely used. One that's widely used in agile development, which is something that shows up in a lot of companies. After a project or after a sprint, they will do something called a post-mortem, where you talk about what went well, what went poorly, and what you can do differently the next time. And there's a flip to that called a pre-mortem. So you do it right before you launch something, or you do it right before you've about to finish a major milestone or major task. And then you imagine, like we did the thing, it came out terrible. What went wrong? And in the pre-mortem, you sort of pre-game all of the things that people can think about that could have happened. And then you wonder, okay, did we cover that edge case? Did we cover that hole? Is that something that could happen? And anything, if anybody graduates from Lambda School and goes to work in cloud computing, anything that is mathematically anything that is possible is mathematically probable at scale. If you have something that is going to be a 1 in 10,000 chance of happening, on a single host, you're like, that won't happen very often. But if you have 50,000 nodes running in production, it'll happen immediately. At least, it's, all the time. There's when you're doing, so I work for Oracle, and if you talk about imposter syndrome, poster child for imposter syndrome. I don't have a CS degree. I went to school for English, for creative writing, and I actually dropped out. I've been working in this industry for a long, long time, and I was working for a company in New Hampshire, and Oracle bought us. So people say, oh, where do you work? I say Oracle, and they say, oh, that's interesting. And it's like, well, I feel like I got in through the side door. Like I feel like I wouldn't have been hired by Oracle had I come in through the traditional method. So I always feel like I'm hiding out, like I managed to sneak in. And so you spend a lot of time proving to yourself that you belong. And that's okay, because it means that you're always getting better. When you stop improving, that is the best you will ever be, and it's all downhill from there. So keep at it and keep learning. I would be thrilled if I could get some questions. Otherwise, I'll just babble. I'll keep babbling at you for another 15 minutes, and then be like, oh my God, this old guy. I just want to go eat lunch.
So I'll start the questions.
Mm-hmm.
When you're starting at a new company and joining a new team, what's the best strategy coming in and trying to get acquainted with the team and trying to get over that imposter syndrome of, okay, I'm here, but I don't know if it should be here.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's tough, especially when I got here. I came to a company. I came from a startup with maybe 15 employees, and the company that I joined at the time was called Dyn, and we do DNS services. We run the internet, and so I was a web development engineer at the time. I don't do that anymore. But when I got here, there's a bunch of gray hairs, a bunch of neck beards, who had been running DNS forever, and but yeah, it was very intimidating. What I did was on my way to work, there was a place called the Black Forest Cafe, and they made cookies that were about 6 inches in diameter. I mean, these just giant cookies. And I'd get a box of those, and I'd bring them to work, and I'd put in chat, free cookies. You have to come to my desk, and you have to introduce yourself, and you will get a cookie. And I met a lot of people doing that. So if you're, here's a really good thing to know about when trying to appeal to people's interests, not their reason. Always appeal to interests, because people don't make decisions rationally. If I made decisions rationally, I would not have owned a rear-wheel drive car in New England, but I did for 3 years. It was terrible. Don't do that. People make decisions with emotions. So appeal to their guts, appeal to their stomachs works very well. There's probably about 6 months ago, I did a brain dump into a website called sweatthesoftskills.com. And it's got some essays on there about persuasion, active listening, how to be happy, or like how I've discovered how to be happy so far. And so maybe if you find some value there, that would be amazing. But yeah, I just put that there to, had done a lot of research into that stuff over the last couple of years, and it was just kind of puke that out. I know I just really sold it with puked that out.
Yeah, I'm gathering a list of all the books you're recommending and podcasts and whatnot, so I'll drop that in Slack as well as the YouTube description.
Perfect. I can send a more comprehensive list after this, because I know it's a lot of information and it's just a ton of stuff. Peter Gray asks, how do you find time to read? Pretty much the same way that I find time to write. I get up at 6 a.m. every morning, and I make a cup of coffee, and I feed the cats, and then I sit down and I write 1,000 words. I've been doing that for 6 months, and I've written a book and a half. So when people say that I don't have time for something, what they really mean is that's not a priority for me. So once someone decides that something will be a priority, they make it happen. But a lot of times it can come down to just time management. And there's I don't know if anybody is familiar with Warren Buffett. He's got a method for prioritization. Like there's a story where he once asked his pilot, he'd been working for 15 years, like, why are you still working for me? Why aren't you off doing something else? And he asked him, so if you made a list of all your priorities, like all the projects and things you were going to be working on, how big is the list? And the pilot thought about it. He's like, well, there's probably 15 things on it. He's like, 15, that's really interesting. If you had to rank them, what would be your top 3? So the pilot thought about it. And he's like, probably these 3 things. And then Warren says, so what do you do with the remaining of the list? And the pilot thought, well, I guess I'd spend a little bit of time here and there working on that. And Warren said, no, those are the things that you must avoid at all costs lists. So you find the things that you want to do, and you go and you say these three things, preferably one. If you can find one thing, and you pour all your attention at that one thing, and then you finish, and then you go on to the next thing. Maybe 3. But never 10 and never 15. Your attention span is a finite bucket. You get a finite amount of it every day, and you have more in the morning. Well, it depends on whether or not you're a morning person or an evening person. But if you divide your day into 15-minute chunks, I think there's 92 or 96 of them, and then you subtract 8 hours worth for sleep, or however many that you get sleep. And then work, and then eating, and shuffling back and forth between work, dealing with your family, kids, if you've got kids. I mean, that's an enormous time sink. And then what you have left is all of the time that you can spend on your projects, on the things that you want to do and you want to advance. And it's actually a pretty small number. So, and if you think about the amount of time that it takes to get into focus work or get into flow, for me it takes about 30 minutes to get into flow, and that's the state where just time evaporates and it's things are just trucking and I'm in the zone. It takes about 30 minutes to get in that. I don't have time for 5 things or 10 things or 15. I can do my work, my writing, reading, and maybe an extracurricular game here and there. I'm slightly addicted to Factorio, the game Factorio. Anybody that likes to play that, that's basically, if you like that, you will make a really good automation engineer. So yeah, that's really what it is. It's finding the time. It's not finding the time. It's finding the priority. deciding what those are and being okay with them. It's okay to say, I just don't have time to read. Raymond Rosario, Factorio is my jam. Right on. I've dumped an obscene amount. I look at I really don't like the fact that Steam tracks my game time, because it allows me to see, like, wow, I could have been doing so many more productive things. But it's no big deal. You have to be. Another thing that my brother, the one that runs the crazy marathon, says, you have to make peace with your pace. You have to be okay with how fast you move. If you want to go faster, learn how to be faster, but don't beat yourself up about the fact that you're not as fast. It's okay. I mean, there's no right or wrong way to do things when it comes to that. So move it. Be okay with your pace.
Hey Tyler, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so thanks for the presentation. I just had a question, if I could jump in real quick. Was wondering, you said you worked on a lot of small teams, well, small and big, you said.
Yep.
But what or how long was like the longest it took for you to get kind of caught up with like all the technology and all the stack and everything? Like how long did the onboarding process take after you got some of these jobs at the smaller companies where you have a large amount of responsibility, or you're working with a new language which you haven't worked with before, that kind of thing?
It totally depends on the project. Sometimes it's been, and it also depends on the onboarding, whether or not that team has ever onboarded anybody before. So you may be the first one they've onboarded in like a new startup, and like the first 2 or 3 founders or technical founders are still there, and they have to. You might be the guinea pig, so that can be. Luckily I was never that guy. They'd already onboarded somebody, so I benefited from the fruits of someone else's pain. The startup I worked at before this one, it was probably 3 months, maybe less. I was learning a totally new language, a totally new stack. I'd actually taken a break from software engineering for a few years, so I was coming back to it. And but I just threw myself at it, and I worked a lot of hours. I don't necessarily advocate doing that because I almost burned out, which would have been really bad. Definitely pace yourself. And at the time, I didn't know how I learned best, and now I do. So I think that would have been helpful to know that I actually learn in smaller chunks. So almost like pulses, rather than like 8 hours straight of something. An hour, 2 hours, take a break, go for a walk. I take a lot of walks. I'm very lucky in that my job actually encourages people to get out. At 5:30 in the afternoon, my manager will be, if they're still here, will be asking, what are you still doing here? Get out, go have life. It's been wonderful. I worked for companies where it wasn't that way at all, where everyone was in a masochistic death march, and those are no fun. You can, if you do that, use it as a learning experience, learn as much as you can, stay for maybe a year, long enough that you never want to do that again, and then go do something else. The software industry it's an amazing time to get into this industry. It's an amazing time. I was talking to a director here, a software director here, and mentioned that I was coming to talk to you. And he said that during the 90s, software engineering, they tried to make a commodity out of it, meaning they tried to offshore a lot of it. And it did. It went over to India, it went over to Eastern Europe, went into a lot of places. And what they found was people were really good at getting the jobs, but they weren't good at doing the work. And so that all of that's coming back. So it's very rare that a company will ship their work overseas anymore. because it's really, the communication is huge. They realize that no, we actually need them here. And we need them talking to our stakeholders, and we need them talking to our users, and they need to be here to do that. And the industry is just exploding. I mean, you want to get into finance, you can get into finance. You want to get into medical systems, you can get into medical systems. You want to do cryptocurrency, it's a Wild West. The cloud computing thing is enormous. So I work at Oracle, I work at, at what used to be Dime. We're helping them build their next cloud. And it's just, I'm in over my head. It's insane. It's how fast I don't know if anyone's familiar with the singularity, the idea that things are moving so fast, or, it's just it's just this explosion of information and everybody will merge together. It'll be amazing. I feel like I'm in it, like I'm watching a slow moving one. There's so much happening now that I can't even keep track of it. I used to do a lot of work in Amazon AWS, and I get an digest email from them that shows me all the new things they're doing. It's huge. It's just, I don't have time there's not enough time. Even if I did that 8 hours a day, I wouldn't have enough time to grok, to understand all of the things that they're doing. I wandered off. I actually don't know if that answers your question.
It does, thanks.
Perfect.
If maybe I can ask a follow-up question, slightly. What do you think about freelancing during that time, when you're in that onboarding, or say you're getting this new job, and you are working with a completely new language and all that kind of thing, and you want to also do freelancing on the side? Like, have you ever done freelancing, or would you recommend freelancing during that time in that first year when you're working at that first job with this first new stack? A lot of firsts there, but yeah.
No, I totally understand. Again, it depends on the circumstances. It depends on whether or not you definitely would want to be above board with the company that you're working for, them to be aware that you're doing freelancing, if you can. If you can't, then that's up to you. I've always found that honesty is really the best policy. It's not like an altruistic thing. It's a self-defense thing. Nobody likes to be surprised, especially your employer. They hate that. So if they're okay with it, and you feel like you can swing that, like if you have the mental bandwidth to do both, then yes. And the reason I say yes is because if it is what you're doing, freelancing is a different stack, it means it's a different flow of ideas. It's a different discipline, and you want to be cross-disciplinary as much as you can. The idea that it used to be, and actually I may give really horrible advice, so take this with a grain of salt. It used to be that you could focus on one thing and then do that your entire career. There are still COBOL developers making a ton of money because nobody else wants to do that. That said, if you are cross-disciplinary, if you do web development, if you do a little bit like database development, you do host management, if you are aware of the whole, as much of the stack as possible, and nobody is full stack, by the way, unless they're a kernel developer. Otherwise, it's, you know more about the stack, but you're not full stack. So if you have the mental bandwidth and your company is okay with that, then yeah, definitely. Especially if it's a stack that you don't want to forget. I've done that before. I've done here. They're okay with me doing side work once in a while. I personally don't have the bandwidth for it. I've discovered. I tried a couple times, didn't work. I get overwhelmed and have to cut it short, or just finish the project and then not take any more work. But I also learned that my brain is an etch-a-sketch. So after about 3 months of me not doing something, it's effectively like somebody it's gone. So if you want to do the freelance thing to retain skills, yes.
Cool. Thanks. In particular, I was referring to working with PHP because of freelancing with PHP, and even though I haven't worked with it yet, that's what I'll be working with at the job. So, yeah.
PHP is never going away. I did a lot of work in PHP. It's a really good language to learn. It's better now than it was when I started using maybe 10 years ago. But there's a lot you can do with it. It's very versatile, and WordPress runs on it. So it's actually a really good skill to have. That's a good language to have under your belt.
Cool. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
So we have time for one last question if anybody wants to hop in and has any burning questions. Well, Sai, do you have any last parting advice that you want to give to our students here?
Yes, one thing. If you follow anybody on Twitter, there is a guy named Naval, Nabal. His last name, I believe, is Ravikant. He created AngelList. He is a really interesting thinker. He has some very interesting ideas around, he's very heavy in the cryptocurrency space, but I wish I could have a real life conversation with him. He's really, really cool, and I've learned a lot from him, and I've never met him. If you follow anybody on Twitter, that is the guy. That's the wonderful thing about Twitter, is that you can find people who you normally would not have the ability to have a conversation with, and see what they're thinking. There's a Japanese poet, I cannot remember his name, and there's something that he wrote, and loosely translated, it is, seek not the footsteps of the wise, seek what they sought. So find people on Twitter and things on social media that you are interesting and smart and are active in the space, and go follow them, and then go look at their following list or their followers, who they're following, and follow them, and listen and interact and learn from people that you would never have the opportunity to speak with. And that's it. And I very much appreciate the opportunity to come here and babble at you.
Yeah, we are so happy to have you. I will have to get a list from you of any books, podcasts, websites that you recommend. I'll send that out to our students, and then they'll have to make some time in the morning or the afternoon to read. You guys got to read. You can't stare at a computer all day, every day. But and this will be up on YouTube soon. Just thank you so much, Sai, for your time today, and hope everybody has a good rest of their day. Thanks.
Great. Thank you.
See y'all later. Bye.